So let's get started. So thank you all for coming back relatively on time. Not the least bit surprised. The excitement around our exhibitors is very high. We've got a lot of companies that are down there that are really doing some important and fun work, and so thank you for spending time with them. And please, during our breaks, try to spend more time with them. They've put a lot of work into coming here, so thank you for that. We're going to start our second panel, and so let me introduce the panel moderator, Jim Matheson. Jim is really a hero of mine. He's a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, naval aviator, flown over 200 combat missions, Top Gun instructor, Harvard Business School graduate, highly recognized venture capitalist out of Flagship, been a champion of the water sector for many, many years, and is most recently stepped into the ring as the CEO of one of arguably the most exciting startups in the industry today, Oasis Water. So please give a warm welcome to Jim and Jim's panel.
Thank you, Earl. All I can do is screw it up from here on, I guess. So it's good to see everyone, and I really appreciate the excitement for the exhibitors. Oasis is one of them, but it was great to walk the tables and see not only the great companies, but also the different dimensions of a water cluster, from the government, from academic, startups, and large companies. And that really is the goal of today, is to bring those different dimensions together to have a dialogue about how we move the cluster forward and create a more fertile environment for innovation to happen here in Massachusetts in the water industry, and for that innovation to have a global impact. And that really is what this panel is about. It's going to build on the first panel, which was really, if you look at the governor's three pillars: academia, innovation, and infrastructure. The first panel was really about connecting academia to innovation. So how do we get more innovation out of our academic institutions? And we are absolutely blessed and lucky here in Massachusetts to have such an incredible array of academic institutions, but also such great innovation. This panel is going to focus on the next step, which is how do we take that innovation and turn it into real infrastructure, real solutions in the marketplace. So it's interesting, if you look at the back of the AWWA journal that you got, there's a mission statement. It says, "Together we aim to bring abundant, clean water to the world through local innovation, global export, and a connected community of business, academia, and government." So that last part is what we're here about, but it really is that first part about the local innovation and global export, and really I'll change it to say global impact, that we need to be focused on. It's interesting for me, the last 15 years, having been involved in many different startups, primarily in the sustainable technology space, founding them, financing them, growing them, sitting on boards, and also running them in different cases, and now for the last 12 months and for the foreseeable future running Oasis. The challenge that we have for many of these companies is, how do you grow a global company from the outset? It's no longer the case that you can walk down the street and find all the customers you need to actually grow a company, especially in sustainable technologies, and most especially in the water industry. We certainly have some issues here in Massachusetts as it relates to water, and Ken Kimmel can share some of the solutions they're trying to bring to bear on the nitrate problem on the Cape. But water is not really front of mind as a problem set here in Massachusetts or New England. But if you travel around the world, as I know you all do, and certainly I do, including leaving for China tomorrow, if you get off a plane in Beijing, you get off a plane in Dubai, you go to other countries like Texas, and you actually see that there's significant problems south of the border there. Those folks are looking for solutions. So the question is, how do we, as Massachusetts-based innovators, bring our inventions, our innovations, and ultimately our solutions into the global marketplace? So we're fortunate to have a great panel. I can say I handpicked these three gentlemen really selfishly, because I wanted to hear what they had to say and learn from them as it relates to some of the things that we're trying to do at Oasis. But we have folks that have done it all, not only collectively but individually. So each of our panelists, from Carmichael Roberts at Northbridge Venture Partners, Sean Peterson, who's at the International Finance Corp, and Trey Kellett, who's with the General Electric Company and their venture capital group. These three guys, interestingly, all are engineers, technical folk, all have MBAs, all have started companies and been in the startup world, and have been involved in financing some of the most interesting and exciting companies. and helping them from startup through to global solution provider. So they're going to be able to bring a set of perspectives that are both similar but different. You have one of really the world's leading venture capital firms in Northbridge. You have in General Electric Company, I think one of the most exciting and certainly one of the most global industrial companies. And in the IFC, as part of the World Bank that many of you may not know, you have, I think, one of the most untapped, but one of the most interesting resources for helping young companies go global. So let me do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to turn over the panel to my friends and colleagues with an initial question. This is your time too, so if you have a question, raise your hand, and throughout, and certainly at the end, I'd like to get your questions answered by the panel as well. So Carmichael Roberts has been a friend and a colleague for many, many years. PhD in organic chemistry from Duke, MBA from MIT, has been involved in starting many of Boston's most outstanding companies, especially in the medical, technology, and biotech sector. And a handful of years ago, he joined Northbridge Venture Partners as a general partner and has been sitting between entrepreneurship and venture capital for the last 4 or 5 years and has helped start and invest in some of the most interesting sustainable technology companies. And he brings a real passion to being part of important companies that are solving important problems. And we'll turn to him to hear a little bit about some of the similarities and differences between biotech, which is a cluster that is well formed here, and the emerging water and clean tech cluster, and what we can learn from that and from building a company in those sectors. Sean Peterson. Sean has done many different things as well. Really has spent his career innovating in the financial services sector. An undergrad from RPI in chemical engineering, an MBA from the Wharton School, and has been in many different places along the financial services value chain, including in startup, in the banking world. Before he was at IFC, he was at Good Energies, which I think many of you know is really one of the premier venture capital firms investing in clean technology. It's a European-based family office, but has had a major impact over the last decade in investing not only in innovation, but in projects. And then he brings all that experience to the IFC, and he'll share a little bit about what IFC does and how they can be a partner for these young companies. And last but certainly not least, we have Trey Kellett directly to my left. He's a senior director at General Electric Company in the venture capital arm. I'm sure many of you know GE has long had a very active venture capital activity, but you may not know they have an adjacent activity called the Energy Technology Ventures Group, which is a really interesting triumvirate between GE, between ConocoPhillips in the oil and gas space, and between NRG Energy in the energy space. And it brings together a collection of folks that can look at almost any problem in the world with great expertise, the depth that was discussed in the last panel. He's well Ivy Leagued. He has a chemistry degree from Dartmouth. That's correct. Go Green. And an MBA from Yale, which is the place where the technology from Oasis came, and has been involved, again, in startup. He was involved in a wastewater treatment startup, and he also spent time in the consultancy space where he worked at the intersection of public policy, environmental policy, and technology innovation, so brings a unique perspective across those different dimensions. So I hope you'll agree with me that we have a really interesting collection of folks that can bring to light some of the ideas about how we help Massachusetts-based companies take their local innovations in the global marketplace. So with that, Carmichael, let me turn to you, sir, and share a little bit about your experience in the entrepreneur and venture capital intersection. But in particular, you have bridged the gap between life sciences, medical technology companies where there's a well-formed cluster and big and small companies have figured out how to work well together, and you're trying to bring that into the clean tech space, and I know that you have a deep passion for water. So share a little bit about Northbridge, some of your experiences, but in particular focus on that question, what can we learn from that other sector?
Yeah, so just a quick background on Northbridge because I think it's relevant to the perspective. So Northbridge is we're a fairly diversified venture firm where I have a bunch of partners who focus on more IT things like, the next Facebook and the next Google, far away from what we're talking about today, but I'm exposed to that in my conversations, daily sometimes, in contrast to what I'm working on. And that'll sort of characterize the similarities between life sciences and Jim, like you said, let me just say clean tech, and then specifically say where I think water sits in and how I see it. So, when you look at the kind of things that life sciences and that cluster had to deal with 10, 15 years ago and even longer. And you think about some of the similarities with clean tech. I mean, what are they? I mean, the kind of problems that you're solving in life sciences are hard problems to solve. The kind of problems that we're solving in clean technologies are hard and important problems to solve, like life-changing, game-changing type problems. They're not fads. They don't go away. When you build a business in life sciences that solves a problem, it's typically built to last and endures a really long time. When you come up with a business that works in clean tech, it's very similar, right, in the aspects. Whereas, we can look at some companies in our Northbridge portfolio that we wonder 2 years from now what's going to come along and make it completely, irrelevant in some of the IT side. So that's one of the similarities, and I'm going to contrast it to some of the IT things, the differences when you're focusing on problems like that. The other thing, Jim, you mentioned global. One of the things that's amazing, I think true in life sciences, I see the same thing in clean tech, is even though the problems that we're solving are huge and stretch across all around the globe, the community feel is really small. Mm-hmm. You show up to an event like today, and many people here all know each other and are happy to see each other again. And that, by the way, I can tell you, is similar even today in life sciences. Same exact thing. It's got that same sort of community close feel amongst folks. Creativity and innovation and invention, huge in life sciences. It's what drives people. I love the panel before talking about what's happening in academia, the crossover to the importance of government in life sciences. Same exact thing in clean tech. We can't do it in either area without committed, dedicated, smart government like what we have here in Massachusetts and what we have in other parts of the globe. Same exact similarity. That you see large and small companies working together, excited to do so, critical to do so. I know Trey and I, for example, work together on several companies, and we're better for doing it. So those are some of the similarities. And the last thing I'll say is water is particularly special, because I can tell you today, we're looking more at clean tech as the angle for today. I can be in a life science meeting and we can talk about water. And it's one of the few categories that I'd say are common when you look at impact on human life, and all the way from whether you're, as mentioned earlier, a pharmaceutical company that cares about what's in the water to save lives, all the way to just the basic idea of needing water from industry purposes to sustainability. I think is a big deal.
Great, thank you, Carmichael. So, Sean, your career, as I said earlier, has spanned many different dimensions of financial services and investing, but in particular, your last two roles at Good Energies on the venture capital side. I know many of the interesting companies you were involved in, and now at the unique perch at IFC, you've had an opportunity to have a truly global perspective on these companies and what it takes. In particular, I think at IFC, the whole mandate is to help companies become global. So share a little bit about IFC and its role inside the World Bank. I think that will be new to many in the group. But in particular, when a company is thinking about finding a capital partner to go global, what are some of the things that they ought to think about it related to the connections and helping people understand the context they're trying to operate in?
And apologies for the voice, lost it about 2 days ago. And thank you, Jim, for the invite. The quick background on the IFC is established over 60 years ago and was set up to be the for-profit arm of the World Bank. Some people know about it in the room, probably some don't, but it's probably worth mentioning. We're a profit-driven organization, in case the words World Bank draws your attention in a different direction. We obviously have a triple bottom line focus, so we have environmental and social mandates we try to achieve as well, but our focus is financial return. The group invested about $16 billion last year. To put it in context, and probably about 20% of that was in equity, 80% in debt. And generally those were in companies in the emerging markets, but there's a portion of what we do fits into the tech transfer space. And so we often look in the developed markets like the US or Europe for opportunities to take technologies and help bring them into the emerging markets where we see there's a need for that solution. And that's part of what my team was set up to do. We're a corporate venture arm that was established about a year and a half ago to try to look into the clean tech, water tech, ag tech type of space. Of relevance here today, on the water side, the IFC has had a water investment group for many, many years, and probably most familiar to people as an infrastructure type investor. They, since '03, so in the past 10 years, they've done about $1 billion of investment. I would kind of categorize that as 80% infrastructure, which is probably not what we're all discussing today, although we are ultimately getting into infrastructure. And 20% kind of fits more into the manufacturing of the solutions and or some of the technology investments. And it's kind of a similar, it's a bit similar on the split between equity to debt that's been invested. And that's spread across about 100 different companies, just to put it into perspective. So you can kind of do the quick math on average investment. Some of those might be very large, $70, $100 million type infrastructure water plays. And some might be a $5 million investment in a distributed water company in India. I think what we generally are looking for, clearly water is important. It's something that we deal with in a lot of our markets on a daily basis. And so I think we have some pretty good knowledge of where some of the pain points are. But when I look at some of the opportunities that my group has to do venture investing, and what are we seeking in a company, and this probably speaks a little bit more towards the mandate fit and problem solution. What helps us is to know that you may have a problem that you're solving, but you actually understand how it would get solved in our markets. I think there's kind of two different types of people that have approached us. We have people who recognize their leak detection solution is fantastic, and Brazil's got a 48% leakage rate that they haven't identified. So they should go to Brazil, and that's probably a good point. I spend about once every 3 months, I'm down in Brazil for 1 or 2 weeks. Brazil is an interesting place to do business. Actually, I think it's a great place to do business, but it's a unique place to do business. And so recognizing there's a problem there is helpful. But I think overall, I've seen groups come that identify a problem and a solution, and others who have come and said, I've talked with people in the space, here's where my value prop is for this solution. That doesn't mean you actually have sales, perhaps. Ideally, you had sales in the emerging markets, but you recognize and know how you could potentially do business and who you would do business with. And I think often that happens through interactions with groups like ourselves, our advisory team, as well as with people like the Commerce Department. And we can go into more of it later, but that's kind of the two groups I see, is people who've kind of figured out how they would work, and others who recognize just a pure opportunity. And we prefer the former than the latter.
Good, thank you, Sean. So, Trey, turning to GE as really a quintessential example of a strategic venture capital partner, talk a little bit about the VC activity broadly, and then specifically so the ETV activity as it relates to things you're doing in water. And if folks are thinking about strategic partners, what advice do you have for them, specific to GE, but generally about selecting a strategic partner, when to do it, what to look for, what to expect, and ultimately also what not to expect?
Sure. So thanks, Jim. And I think we unwittingly saw a little bit of that Top Gun instructor training here. The element of surprise. We got our questions about 10 minutes ago. So
keeps
we'll
it fresh.
Right, true.
GE. I mean, first in terms of our kind of role in Massachusetts, certainly I think we've been able to tie into a lot of what exists of the cluster already. Ionics is in very many ways a cornerstone of what's currently GE Water. Engineering Services is headquartered in Billerica, measurement and controls in Burlington. So very kind of I think if a lot of kind of our very smart jobs are here in the state for a lot of the reasons that the governor and others mentioned. In terms of kind of what we're looking for, and I'll say for kind of specifically for GE, but it also applies for some of our energy technology ventures partners. GE in a lot of ways is about systems. So if you think of you know, kind of how the company started with Edison. You know, he essentially got into the power generation business in order to be able to sell light bulbs. And I think in a lot of ways that's a good framework to think about now, and that, you know, GE has, you know, kind of the overall, you know, system infrastructure, the servicing, the, you know, credibility to kind of develop know-how, and often kind of needs that nugget to, you know, that one, you know, there's that one piece to really, you know, help customize a solution for customers and address a new problem. And so I think, at least from a strategic standpoint, I think, you know, that's kind of what, in some ways, that we approach things is, you know, when we see a solution that GE can solve but are missing a piece, that's one area where we, you know, our team really helps. So I think that's one piece. Another piece is, you know, also a little bit longer term of, you know, we don't have crystal clear vision of what's on the, you know, what's going to be needed 10 years from now, but you know, put some lines in the water to, you know, help them mature.
So when GE makes an investment, when you Trey make an investment, is part of the hypothesis that the company you're investing in can go across the GE global network, or would you invest in a company that would be much more niche than that? It would solve a problem in a particular region.
I think I've seen examples of both, really. You know, there's some that you know, are platforms in themselves that we could see growing into a, you know, $1 billion+ you know, company you know, in its own right. But I mean, there are also, you know, and Waters I think is unique and not necessarily unique, but I mean, in a lot of ways, challenges are very kind of locally, you know, a lot of details in kind of the local, you know, situation of, you know, whether you think it's kind of, you know, mining in Chile or, you know, kind of municipal self-sufficiency in Singapore. You know, there are a lot of technologies that apply in certain places that, you know, we think are just as important to get involved with.
Okay. So Carmichael, you go back to either your entrepreneurship days, you're sitting on the board of one of your companies, and you're trying to help the CEO think about becoming a global company. What are some of the either in the human capital or financial capital, how do you think about the tactics to do that, and a couple sort of fatal mistakes you've seen in companies trying to become that?
Yeah, so it's always challenging in a startup to, you know, you always hear focus, and, you know, one thing is focus around the product, but you also focus geographically, often, you know, to get started. But you want to get that mindset still in the company, and definitely at the CEO level, that it's a global business opportunity, especially in, you know, things like water. So what I typically do is encourage that CEO to travel. You know, I mean, one of the most difficult things to do is to say that you have a global mindset, but then your body is just sitting locally somewhere. It's not realistic, right? And so, you know, I'll often tell, you know, my CEO, look, I don't care about these other 2 meetings. I can even substitute for you if need be. You know, I'll sit in for you. But go meet people in this part of the world, or go to this particular conference in this region of the planet, just so you can network and think differently. Because even though it's a global opportunity, the mindsets, I think this is what Trey was getting at, you know, you still have differences locally that nuances, right? And so that's one of the things that you settle in on. The other thing I'd say that I'll do is encourage a collaboration, as long as it's not too distracting and too hard. I'll encourage a collaboration either with a company that has a global footprint that can get us there, but also has a local presence. Or on occasion, it could be licensing intellectual property or something. It could be within academia. Like, do something that's outside the U.S.
Good. So, Sean, when you're looking at a company to make an investment and you're looking to take them from a U.S. context into an emerging country, one of the things that Per Sunapee is going to share with us here after this panel is the activity here about piloting. It's so important to take these technologies, especially in water, and get a proof of concept, do a pilot. Does a pilot in Massachusetts get you a check mark in Bangladesh? Does it get you a check mark in Africa? Or how do you solve the issue of having to do a demo everywhere you go, and what advice for the cluster or for a company about navigating that?
Well, I just discovered Jim doesn't like me very much because he gave me the first real tough question.
So it's out of fondness that thing.
Are you saying my global
Yeah.
question was the easy one?
Yeah, I thought the CEO thing was pretty soft. So
It
yeah,
was. It was.
put him on a plane, it all works out.
Right.
So
It's true.
I just met him, so that's going to backfire later. Just to be honest, and look, this is really interesting. So we did an investment recently in Organica, not a U.S. Tech. I mean, it's actually a U.S. company, but it's really based in Hungary. And there's some Yale people involved, so you'll be happy. The reality is it's a distributed wastewater treatment technology, and I do think it is absolutely imperative that you have proven yourself to some degree in the local markets. And we're looking at another technology right now that's down in the south, and another group out in the EU right now, where I can tell you both of those groups have proof points in their markets. The point is their value prop is greater in Latin America for the one company, and the other one is out in Southeast Asia. It's no doubt that they have proven their technology to some degree in their local markets, because without that, we're not going to be that interested, and we don't see how the Bangladeshi, to your point, guy working in the dyeing factory isn't going to fly out if he doesn't know there's something already, of substance there. So you do need the proof point. Whether or not you end up with a local demo is something that we're challenged with. One particular group that we're looking at right now, they've had to go establish with one of the main wastewater groups that we work with and have an investment in Latin America, and go do the demo. Do I think they got the demo, and have they started to have commercial agreements for if demo does X, I then have sales of Y, because they had the facilities down near Atlanta? Absolutely. So I think that's important. Have I seen anybody skip the demo in the local markets? At this point, I can't say that always happens, but I definitely think you got to show something here of substance, and that requires capital. I realize that.
I think, I mean, just to build on that, I think a key element is finding, if you do have a pilot, to avoid doing several pilots everywhere. I think it's it's important to find a really desperate customer. They're
With money.
With money, that's right. So, I think, particularly water, where it's so easy to get caught in kind of the regulatory issues and things, that if you have someone who really needs to, a solution, within, 6 to 12 months or what have you, there's a good chance they'll be willing to take the results of that one demo, even if it's not a perfect fit for what they're doing.
Can I just add to that? This is just a really good note. Make sure that partner, whatever piece of the wherever you're being integrated into their water facility solution, and I've seen this now happen more than once, unfortunately, that it doesn't have some seasonality associated with it. I'll just note that you probably want to understand where you're cutting into their system. And the other is their financial interest in it, have a little bit of their capital coming into that project. So, I mean, these may be obvious, but I've seen both of those things happen incorrectly already.
Yeah, agreed. So let me turn to the audience. First, a question for you, and then hopefully you have a question for our panelists. How many folks in the audience are actively now doing something outside the U.S. in whatever realm you're working in? Okay, easily half. How many of you are in the next 12 months thinking you need to, want to, or preparing to do something globally? Okay. How many folks are just dang comfortable right here in beautiful Massachusetts? Okay, a couple, all right. Honestly, all right, good for you. Good for you. No wonder I don't see you in the frequent flyer line. Okay.
Jim, you need to make them my CEO. I'll put them on.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to interesting spots on the planet.
Yeah, exactly.
I noticed a lot of hands drop between the first and second question. People are international now and aren't going to be in 20.
Yeah, maybe
months.
that's
Is that it?
How many? So, any questions from the audience specifically on this topic for any of our panelists? I'll keep going. Kathy.
could actually ask each one of them.
No, can you just make one question and make it pithy? That'd be great.
To GE, how committed is GE to staying in the water sector? The rumors are enormous in terms of the possibility of selling off the water sector or truly merging it beyond where it's been merged in the energy group to recognizing the energy water nexus.
So the question was how committed is GE to the water sector? So is there dynamics at GE? You see it, Siemens is going through some changes, and GE has done that in the past. So talk about where it fits and the commitment.
Sure. So I where I sit I'm in GE corporate, so I don't have any insight into what to that question. I know to Carmichael's point about how water touches a lot more than a lot of things that GE is involved in, from power, as you mentioned, healthcare, some of the instrumentation work we're doing, the original thesis was water underpins a lot of what GE does. And
Yeah. So
it's true.
Extend that question and picking up on Sean's comment. So and it will come maybe down the line on this one, which is, as a startup, you're trying to make a decision not only about your technology and your market, but the connection is your business model. How do you go to market? Am I a system provider? Am I selling membranes? Am I trying to sell a subsystem? When GE looks at these things, the mistakes you've seen startups make, are they either trying to do too little or too much of the value in the business model that really enables you to go global through partners? And is there a particular business model that GE looks for that fits into your systems orientation?
I don't know. I think one way to look at it, and I think it varies a lot depending on the situation, but I think it's ultimately a customer question. And that's been a big focus of GE recently, is kind of moving toward customers. And those of you who have seen Lean Startup, the book by Eric Ries, that's Jeff Immelt actually apparently has been said to hand those out on a regular basis. So I don't know. You can have a visual of him kind of packing up his 60-pound backpack at the beginning of every day. But so I think ultimately whatever kind of the product is that you're trying to sell, I think the question is how are they going to use it? How are they going to get comfortable with it? And ultimately GE has a lot of the pieces, and it just needs to sync with whatever kind of the startup happens to have.
Yeah.
So.
Sean or Carmichael, a different view on the question?
I guess the one thing I would add, and it's more of a empirical answer, is I have seen with the business model aspect, one of our groups focus on working with the local engineering solution offering, like understanding how their solution would go into that market and figuring out how complex or lack of complexity, what was the total product they need to have to be able to have it be serviced locally, define what the product was. So I would call it a semi-solutions offering in the end, because not enough wasn't going to be able to have those groups work with it.
I mean, I can add something more from the paranoid small company perspective in the business model, right? And that is, it's really scary to be a small company that has a component that can only make it to market if a larger manufacturer incorporates it. It's even more of a scary endeavor if there are only like one or two out there who are going to do that. So it's
What's wrong with that situation?
Especially if it's GE, it's
right.
perfect.
Trey thinks that's fine. No, so I business model, Jim, in terms of broadly speaking, I tend to have one or two dynamics inside the small company as being important. Either if you're going to have a component that integrates into a larger product to be sold, then let's make sure that there are more like 7 companies out there, not just 1 or 2. That desperately need your solution, and so those numbers are better. If that's not the case, then have more than one product component. In other words, if you got one that happens to only have 1 to 3 customers, then in our business model, then you better have a second, a third, and a fourth product, so that the diversification comes in the product mix as compared to the customers.
Yeah.
With regard to concept and first commercial
question was for Sean. Yale from Mintz-Levin has asked IFC, how do they deal with the proof of concept and demo? Do they invest in that ahead of that? Do they help that, or do they wait for that, I think is the question. Yeah.
Yeah. So from a true project standpoint, and I'm talking from the infrastructure team perspective at the IFC in this answer, we don't generally take technology risks into projects, and we would look for financial return in those projects. So obviously if you have something that isn't technically proven, there's a potential that the cash flows won't come off and pay back either our project equity or project debt. Generally, if you're at a proof of concept, stage 2, I'll call it, that's when it comes back to our team to be looking at it, which is more of a corporate equity type of investment. So I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but is that helpful?
So we're going to do one question, then we'll do a wrap up. Yes, sir.
Okay, Sean.
Oh, Lord.
Is it possible that you're taking a technology risk by not taking a technology risk?
I love that question. Look, you're coming from a guy who does startups. I obviously have a very different perspective than the project finance team, and I would even say at the IFC, there's a few people we were talking with earlier out there who have had exposure with the internet, with my group. And the reality is we make very good money going into the emerging markets, understanding good risks and counterparty risks and country risks. We're not really set up to necessarily take technology risk at the project level. And so my group is really established to try to help work with newer companies to get the IFC familiarized with the technologies before they get deployed into our existing investments. So that's kind of the idea.
So you guys have been great and gracious with your insights. So final question down the line, start with Trey, is you're looking out at the leadership of the Massachusetts Water Cluster. What one, maybe two pieces of advice or urgence do you have for us as we try to help our Massachusetts companies become global players?
I think there's a big role for someone to really kind of sort, organize, aggregate some of the ideas, technologies that are out there. And so, we try to get as involved as we can at MIT, WPI, Northeastern, but there's only so many hours in the day to be able to, visit labs and things. That pretty quickly gets us away from our day-to-day efforts. So I think, whether it's, certainly Carmichael, we rely on quite a bit for, some of the seed stage investments that you make. I think certainly some of the cluster, personnel kind of just getting to understand sort of what the opportunities are that are bubbling up really can help us then take it from there and implement it.
I hear a GE Venture Day coming up for the cluster. Good. Sean.
Great idea.
I'm actually going to echo Carmichael's earlier comment before he gets to. I was being facetious. I do actually think you do need to get out there. I've seen the Commerce Department put together some interesting trips to parts of the world. Our own group occasionally does things on those lines, but putting to a couple of CEOs to go visit something in addition to just China and getting some exposure for a few days is. I do think quite eye-opening from the standpoint of getting contacts with local companies that might need your problem, but also service providers that might help you from everything from legal to engineering, et cetera, so that it gets you to kind of in a different mindset. So that would be my particular thing.
Great. Carmichael?
Yeah, and I guess the thing I would add is, continue to approach, I would advise the cluster to continue to approach this like a small company would in building its business. And that is, keep it small the way it is right now with people represented, from each of the areas, from government to large company to academia to small company and investors, and keep it small and lean and mean. Until it really has a strong platform, and then I would grow it. I would advise against the cluster thinking, let's grow it really big, really fast, before you have that nucleus that knows each other so well and is rock solid. Would be the only thing.
So that very question is going to come to you all after Per Thunaby's talk. So be thinking about some of the ideas across the different sectors that we as a cluster can be doing to help make this happen. And please join me in thanking our panelists for being so agile and insightful.